Hello and welcome to the Good Mornings podcast, where we talk about everything from tacos to tech, from dirt to diamonds. I, of course, am, as always, am your host, Mr. N. Dante Weik. And once again, back on the show, we have Dr. Ronald R. Weik, author, PhD microbiology, and PhD in hilarious family stories. It is great to have you back on.
Well, hello everybody. Nice to see you again. This story I got to tell you about because it's one that is indelible in my memory.
Now, in yesterday's episode, at the very end, I said, "How did you clear the stump?" And we cut it there. We stopped, and I wanted to be able to get another episode of these family stories because I feel like you guys are gonna just love these. So, without any further ado, I'm gonna let him just continue on and make you guys laugh like you have never laughed before.
Well, imagine it's early 1960s, and
American Graffiti style.
you're living though also through some very scary times. The Americans had the ballistic missile research going on. That's where my father was working at the Aberdeen Proving Ground at the Ballistic Missile Research Center there, and what they were doing is were taking the very first computers, the ENIAC and the ORDVAC, EDVAC. Those are the first three that were built at University of Pennsylvania, and they were transferred there to Aberdeen, Maryland, and they were using them to track missiles. Now these computers were huge; they were bigger than rooms, and you would walk through the banks of these computers, and there was vacuum tubes everywhere. They had to keep it air conditioned. It was so hot in there, from the vacuum tubes giving off heat. And you could walk up and down, see all the wires, and you're just looking at the banks, these computer banks. But they didn't do that much, except they were able to allow for guiding missiles because they could take the telemetry that was being fed off the missiles, and that telemetry could be fed into the computers, and then they could guide where that missile was going. So that was a great advantage, and that was what the Americans were doing. Meanwhile, though, the Russians, they were also building missiles, and what they were doing or planning on doing is moving those missiles to Cuba. And you may have all heard about the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Now, a lot of you guys that are big fans of my stuff will know of the game Team Fortress 2, and of course, the Heavy has the cosmetic, the Cuban Bristle Crisis, which is a reference to the Cuban Missile Crisis. So, obviously, you guys can look into that.
So, because all these scientists and engineers, including my father, were very concerned about what the Russians were doing, they decided that they were going to build fallout shelters. Well, these fallout shelters were not just a hole in the ground. The one my father built was big enough for 30 families because he was planning on saving the whole neighborhood if they tried to destroy Baltimore with a nuclear weapon, which the Russians did have that capability, and there was great concern. And so his friend, Dr. Mercedes, who also worked with him, he built a fallout shelter, and eventually he decided, wow, this is really good underground shelter. It wasn't as big as my father's, but he could flood it, and he made a swimming pool, an underground swimming pool. But it had doors like you would see on a ship, going, from submarine from one compartment to the other. They were blast doors.
Or like on like the Titanic or something.
Now, the way my father built his is that he put plywood doors on it. But what was different about it was that the reason you use plywood doors is that when a blast comes, you don't want it to knock out your eardrums. What you do is you build a Z-like passage that.
If you guys have ever played like the games, the Fallout games, the Fallout series of games, you'll see how like it'll have a corridor that goes straight, and then it'll go left, and then it'll go straight again, and then it'll go left again, or it'll go right or something, kind of like that.
And that would allow the blast to go right into the side of the mountain rather than into the fallout shelter, because so that you didn't need that big a door. The door is more to keep out the radiation, and we had covers on the vent pipes for the radiation, so it was quite effective. And anyway, this is where the story really begins. That what we're doing is my father is clearing this field so we can do some farming, and but there was this giant oak tree in the middle of the field, and I'm not sure if it died or not, but in any case, it did get cut down, and we were cutting it up for firewood. But the trunk was probably about maybe 4 feet in diameter. It was pretty big. It was very, very big. And and we had this two-man saw that we would take turns. Well, my brother and I would actually.
Your brother Martin, who we
Yeah,
talked about a little bit yesterday.
yeah. We could only cut up one piece a day. That's how big this thing was, back and forth on a two-man saw. It's one.
Have you ever seen like the Three Stooges, where Moe and Larry will be like cutting something, and then Curly will do something stupid, and Moe will come and he'll grab the saw and he'll like run it over Curly's head. That kind of saw.
So these flexible saws, we got them down to the last piece, and then would take the tractor and would roll them up into the yard to bring them inside the fireplace. Would burn them whole. We had a big fireplace built during the Revolutionary War. All right, so now what's left? The big stump. This stump was the biggest thing you'd ever seen, especially as a kid. You know, you could. This was a very large stump. Probably the diameter was about 24 feet. And not the diameter. The circumference was 24 feet. The diameter was 3 to 4 feet. It was just a really big tree, but it was stuck in the ground, and it was deep, and so.
No, it's probably like 1,000 years old or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Insane on that thing. I mean,
The oldest living thing on the East Coast is the American oak tree. They live to be 1,000 years unless they get cut down or destroyed by lightning, and so still we had to get the stump out of the field. So we drive into town into Havre de Grace, and we go to the hardware store, and my dad goes up to the proprietor and he says, "Hey, I need some dynamite." He says, "Well, how many sticks do you want?"
yeah,
And
because the 1960s was awesome.
yeah, you could just walk into any hardware store and you could buy dynamite. So
Going to Harbor Freight or something. Hey, I need like 20 sticks of dynamite, man.
so he did.
Cool, man.
He says, "Well, give me 20 sticks." He says that should do it. So we come back, put the dynamite in the car, and we drive back to the farm. And he says, "Okay, you boys get up in the fallout shelter," which we could still see what was going on because we were in the passageway to the fallout shelter. And so he is the one to light the fuse. Well, he had some practice with ordnance in the Army. They had blown up some bombs, and so he knew what he was doing. So he put a longer fuse on the dynamite than came with it.
He knew what he was doing, air quotes.
And he set one stick of dynamite. He had to dig it out with a shovel to get the dynamite stick underneath the stump. So we had spent some time doing that and had a nice little tunnel built under there, so you could get the dynamite. So he gets this one stick under there, long fuse. And then he lights it, and he runs for dear life up to the fallout shelter because he knows when this thing goes off, it's going to be like a small bomb going off. So he gets up to it, and we're crouching around, and we're peering out over, and all of a sudden, thump. That's it, just a little thump. Nothing happened. The tree didn't move. Nothing, just a thump. You could feel the ground vibrating, but that was about it. So he says, "Oh, well, this isn't going to do it." So he gets the other bundle that's left, 19 sticks, and he wraps them all together, puts all the fuses together in one big long fuse that he could light and make his way up to the shelter. Well, this time we were really scared because we're talking about 19 sticks of dynamite at one time. But he says, "Oh yeah," he says, this will get it. This will
Foreshadowing, right?
this will blow it from here to kingdom come." So we didn't know what was going to happen. So he lights that thing. He gets all of them tucked underneath there in that tunnel, right under the stump, right in the center of the stump practically. And he lights it and he runs back to the fallout shelter while we're sitting there and we're counting down, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then this mushroom cloud forms and the sky is blackened and it's raining sticks and pieces of bark and dirt and debris down on top of us, and we had never seen a mushroom cloud up close just like that. It was the most phenomenal thing, and the earth shook and it shook. It was just the greatest explosion that I'd ever seen. It was a huge bomb going off at one time, but there was nothing left but a giant hole.
It's just like a divot.
And that was the end of the stump.
The stump trademark.
Yeah, the stump.
Now you told me that you and your brother used to do things that you shouldn't have done. Now, what are some cases of some things that you and your brother should not have done? Namely with rocket motors. Since you guys were so good about that.
Yeah, so my brother, he was 11 months older than I was. He got into explosive devices and building things, and particularly rockets, because that's what my dad did. He was he worked with missiles. So we're playing with these little rockets, the little rocket engines, and you could buy everything in the mail, and he would order the rockets and the engines, and we would set them off in the yard. Well, they all had parachutes, and so they would come down, and you could kind of find them, and then send them back up again. But one time he decides, well, he says, I think I'm gonna take this little rocket and maybe put a big motor on it, which is basically a big big blaster that is just gonna fire this thing off to space. So he does. He gets this big rocket engine, which is about maybe two inches in diameter and say about 8 inches tall, and it's all full of fuel powder. And, we ordered it in the mail. It just shows up on the door, and so
he really wanted to send that thing to another dimension.
He has a nice fuse. He has on it, and so we light it. He lights it actually, and
we light it. He wasn't involved, of course.
This rocket takes off. And it just goes out of sight, and we never saw it again. No sign of it anywhere. It just streaked up into the air and probably made it to the atmosphere, in the outer atmosphere. It was just the most phenomenal thing.
Made it to the moon, man.
Yeah, that was the end. That was the end of that rocket, and so we lost that rocket, which we actually would lose rockets when the wind was blowing. And
hey, there it is. It's coming down right
now.
Sent it into low Earth orbit.
So we also had a lot of powder and explosive powder that we would use building rocket engines. And so one day,
oh yeah, this one I forgot about.
One day we were walking up in the. By now we had moved to another place. We were in a little town called Falls Church, Virginia, and there was an area up on the end of the road that we lived on. It was just woods. It was an old horse farm at one time, and we'd go up there all the time, play in the woods, and later on we actually were able to ride motorcycles through the woods. But at that time we were much younger, so we'd go up there and would walk through the woods. Well, one time we found this giant groundhog hole. This thing was probably about like the size of a telephone pole. It was big and it was straight down, and
we gotta talk about the different ways you've tortured your nieces
and my brother says, this looks like a good place. We could try out some of that excess powder and explosives that we have. We could.
He really said, let's make a pipe bomb, guys.
Yeah, so we could drop it down to the ground, see what happens. So we did.
Hey, don't try this at home. By the way.
So all this powder and everything being stuffed down into the hole. I mean, the hole was just seemed like it was endless.
Remember that groundhog?
But a big old fuse coming out of the end of it. Well, we lit the fuse, of course, after everything was all in place, and then we started walking home, and we walk home, and everything's nice and peaceful. Although there was a kind of a minor quake, but it was just like a rattle. The windows, rattled. You could hear a lot of things. Nothing fell off the shelf, but it was a big thump. Well, and after that, everything was peaceful. Nothing happened. So we're going back to playing around, and next thing you know, you hear all these fire engines racing by the house. What? Why would there be fire engines going by? Oh, they ended up stopping where we had been up there, and they were checking the place out. And they probably had to do a little work up there, and things finally settled down. But fortunately, we hadn't run home. We had just walked nonchalantly. And don't ever do that at home. That things just happen.
Don't do anything we've said.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, kids. Put 26 of dynamite under it.
Yeah, he can't buy this stuff anymore.
You can buy rocket motors.
Yeah, little rocket motors. You can buy
the big
that.
ones too. You can still buy them.
Yeah.
You can still get them at like Hobby Lobby and stuff. am I telling you guys? Don't try this at home. Tell them again. Don't. No, you tell them. If I tell them, it sounds like a joke.
Yeah, well, you can definitely send some pretty big rockets up into the
Don't
into
give them
space.
ideas.
But the little ones are actually they're a lot less expensive and they're fun. And if you can find them again, and if you shoot them into the wind, they drift back towards you, and you try to get them to land where you want them to land, and not put too big of a motor on, so you can use them again.
What about the cannon?
Oh, that was an interesting one. I'd forgotten about that too. Well, we had this wall on the side of our driveway to hold back the lawn. The lawn kind of was higher than a driveway, so it was probably about 3 foot tall. We used that wall for everything. We'd sit on the wall, and someone would pitch the ball towards you, and you'd kick it, and then the opposing team, would be out, fielding, trying to catch the ball in the air, and meanwhile you're running the bases. So it was our kickball wall, and that was probably spent many good hours on it. But coming out of the base of these were drainage pipes, small ones, probably about 3 or 4 inches, and the pipes had a way of letting water out, but they were empty. There was nothing in there. So my brother, again, I guess it seemed that he was the one with the explosives. He says, "Wow, look at that! That's like a cannon. You got a barrel right there. It's already set up and it's aimed, down over the hillside. That's perfect." So sure enough, we get a bunch of we get a big explosive rocket motor engine, powder, everything. So this thing is going to go up at once. But then we stuffed the front of it with stones, so we actually had shot in it.
Like gravel.
Yeah, just gravel, little small pieces of gravel, and then with a fuse.
Of course.
And
like all good cannons, a fuse.
now, in this particular one, you were kind of like the soldiers in the Civil War. You didn't have to run. All you had to do was step aside a little ways. You didn't want to be right next to it in case the whole thing blew up. So we would. That's what we did. Is we set it up like that, and then we stepped aside and lit the fuse, and that thing went off, and it was a huge explosion, smoke belching out of the pipe, and all this gravel flying out. And then it was quiet for about maybe 30 or 45 seconds. And then almost a half a mile down the road, you could hear tinkle, tinkle, tinkle as all these stones were dropping out of the air and hitting these tin roofs on the houses way, way down the road. Well, we didn't do that again because after all, those stones could do some damage, and we had no idea that they would go that far. So that was our cannon building effort, and we did other things, but they were relatively peaceful. Much more peaceful than that for sure.
Yeah, like the snow fort.
Oh, the snow fort. Now that was actually built on this lake that had frozen over. It was our lake, and
No, I'm talking about the other one.
which one?
The one that destroyed your dad's bumper.
Oh yeah. Okay, I'll tell you about that one. So every day we would meet my father at the end of the driveway. We had 100 acres, so you can imagine the driveway was a long ways away from the main road. And would meet him out at the end and would ride in with him, as he came back from work. And we knew government work gets off, closes at the same time every day. 5 o'clock they're off. 20 minutes get home and you're there. So we could be out there and we'd know when he was coming in. But this time we did not go out there. We were very busy doing something else. We decided, since all the snow was on the ground, we were going to build a little fort. But the fort was right across the entrance to the garage.
Oops.
So we're busy working on this fort. And we had probably about, it could have been 3 feet high. It was no taller than that. Like a wall. A bunch of snowballs piled up and then filled in. And, unbeknownst to us, the temperature dropped while we were, after we had finished it. And by then we're up in the house looking out the window, waiting for him to come along. So he comes along with the Volkswagen. He was driving a Volkswagen. It was either the bus or the bug, because he had one of each. I think it might have been. I think it was a bus. Yeah.
He told me it was a bug.
Yeah, he drove the bug to work every day unless he was going to take somebody somewhere. So it could have been the bug. The bug was really light. My brother and I could lift the front end up and twist it around. So anyway, he put the bumper of the car right up against the fork because he was just going to plow through it. But again, he didn't want to damage the car. So he does. He puts the bumper up against it.
He puts the bumper against it and damages the car.
So we're looking at it, and we're laughing our tails off. And the fork won't move. The thing had iced over.
The wheels are spinning as he's trying to knock up his stupid snow cone.
So then he decides to back up a little bit and kind of gun it.
Oops.
So he has a bumper on it, and it's pretty decent bumpers on it. So he goes.
1960s, I think. Come on.
So it was a 1960 Bug, VW Red, and he plowed into it. Well, it didn't budge. It didn't even crack. We're just thinking
The bumper did.
we thought it was so hilarious.
Yeah,
Well,
you thought it was real funny
until my dad comes storming up to the house, mad or a hornet, because he couldn't put his Bug away. Well,
Ron, Martin, you get out there with my sledgehammer.
He
you can destroy that.
he
fork.
corrals the two of us. And of course, it's freezing cold out. We go out there with our hats and gloves and coats on, and we each carrying an axe. And we literally had to chop that fork.
Had to bat each other. That's what I like.
We had to chop that thing to pieces.
It's like a couple of executioners walking away.
I think we learned our lesson.
What about the
Don't do that anymore.
another one to not try at home? Don't build snow forts in front of your garage. What about Chuck Buck?
Oh, Big Fat Chuck Buck?
Yeah.
Oh, let's see. He did some funny things.
I mean, the time that you either said something to him or something.
Oh, got him real angry that time.
You went.
And he came
right
after
on.
me. Oh yeah, he came after me. So he was he was older and bigger than I was. So he would come after me.
We love you, Chuck. You're awesome, man.
And so he would beat you up if he would catch you. But that was the thing, is don't let him catch you. So one time he had beat me up a couple of times. So one time he was up in the tree. We had a willow tree, and it had a fork right in, about 4 or 5 feet off the ground. And he had been up in that tree, and he was coming down. Well, I happened to be standing there with a stick, a big log type stick, and he's in the crotch of that tree, and he can't climb up because I'm beating him with a stick, and he can't get down because I'm beating him with a stick.
Won't that beat off?
So after getting him back, for being beat up myself a couple of times, I throw the stick at him and I run for dear life because I'm running to the house. Now, he was a pretty quick runner, but he wasn't quite as quick as me. And I made it to the house before he jumped out of that tree because I knew he would pummel me. And once you're in the house, you go over and you just sit by your mother and you start playing games. Like nothing ever happened. Who, me?
Hit Chuck Buck with a stick? Nah, man.
But then you had to watch your back after that. That's the way things were back then.
Picture him looking like Buford from what's it called? Phineas and Ferb. That's what I think he looks like.
Yeah, that's about right, actually. And you just had to. Now, when my older brother got into a tussle with him,
Martin.
yeah, they were more even. They had a pretty good tussle. They'd roll around the ground wrestling and striking each other, and but they did very well because they were evenly matched, and so the two of them would get along to a great extent because neither one of them could dominate the other. And that was good for me. And as long as I was with Martin, I was pretty safe. So
Martin could protect you a little bit.
yeah, and we would do things together. Chuck and I, and one particular time we the neighborhood kids that we weren't allowed to play with because they lived in a tar paper shack, and there was 12 of them, and
The ruffians.
yeah, we weren't allowed to play with them. But one time they actually had this go-kart, and we also had a go-kart, a nice fast one. Ours did about 25, 30 miles an hour, and it was an automatic clutch, had maybe a 3 to 5 horsepower engine on the back. And so we brought it out on Interstate 95 to play. Now, the pavement was down, the concrete was laid, and the lane markings hadn't been put in yet, so they're still closed. But there was a nice open run, and you could drive from Aberdeen through Havre de Grace, and if you wanted to dare it, you could go to the part they were working on. And the reason I hadn't opened it was the Susquehanna River Bridge was still under construction. Well, we didn't go that far because we knew that there'd be somebody up there. So we'd go back and forth between Havre de Grace and Aberdeen, and they were down there with their go kart, and we would race them. Well, their car was kind of crude. They didn't have a lot of money, of course, and they wouldn't have any way to start it other than by pushing it. So that's what they would do is they'd get behind us, and they would get two guys behind it, and they'd push it, and when they got right next to us, would hit gas, and then we would take off. Well, because they were already rolling, they had a head start. They would get ahead of us, and they'd be careening down a highway, top speed, and they'd probably be doing about 25 miles an hour. And we'd come up from behind doing about 30 because ours was faster. And then we had a certain bridge across another country road where we would turn around. That was the end point, and then the first one back would win. Well, you're down there, and you're flipping a U-E, and the lanes, of course, are wide. It's the interstate, and you could do your U-turn and then come roaring back, and they're on your tail the whole way, but just a bit behind you, and we'd get back to the end and would win. And so we'd do that again, of course, all day long till you run out of gasoline. But we had about 5 gallons of gas with us, and that was it. So what a great time.
I'd like to thank all of you for stopping by once again for another episode of the Good Mornings Podcast. We are going to do a third episode on family stories, I think, because this is just so much fun. And Dr. Weik has so many just really awesome family stories. From his brother and his neighbors and everything. And I thank you guys so much for stopping by and watching. If you're in your car, put your phone down. What the hell are you doing? Don't forget to put on your seatbelt. And if it's your birthday, happy birthday. If it's not your birthday, too bad. Man, I'm sorry. Have a great rest of your day.